As lenders, we cannot rely on appraisals to get our valuations. And today we're going to break down exactly why.
Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your host from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the show. Today we are talking about the problem, the giant industry problem with appraisals. This came up because there's a publication called the Baltimore Banner, and they sent a reporter to the recent AAPL conference, American Association of Private Lenders, that happened in November. And since then, there's an article that came out and also some TikToks and Instagram videos going around from this reporter. Here's what they were talking about. So a lot of people have heard about the DSCR fraud that happened mainly in Baltimore. There's another fraud popping up in Philadelphia. It's a separate thing. We did an episode on this previously, so we're not going to go too deep into the DSCR fraud because you can check that out on the previous episode. We have stated many times that we believe DSCR is a good product that should be around. I never thought that banks did a good enough job of doing rental property loans, right? That being said, the private lending industry has gotten a little bit loose on it, mainly because of appraisals and valuations and also some fraud that is really, really unfortunate and bad for the industry. But let's be honest, it's not only DSCR loans that are having valuation issues. It is the larger problem that all of, and one of these guys, we're going to talk about a couple of the people that were speaking on stage at AAPL, but they basically said the crux of the entire lending industry is based on appraisals to get their values, and that is a huge fundamental problem.
Yeah, and I mean, this topic came up because a lot of this is tailored to DSCR loans, but this is tailored to any hard money loans, right? It can be fix and flip loans, bridge loans. It can be the DSCR loans. I mean, the DSCR loan is such a big part of the industry at this point. There's just so much of it. And that had such a recent shakeup that I actually think it's kind of hidden a lot of the core issues that the fix and flip lenders, haven't come out to talk about. But we know that there's issues, right? We see them in our portfolios. We see them in other private lenders' portfolios. And I know for a fact that a lot of the lenders that we know, including ourselves, lend significantly more conservatively than institutional capitals does, meaning that, if we have some hiccups and some issues inside our portfolios because market trends, interest rate, whatever it is, softening of different markets. Like everyone has some challenges, especially for lenders that are just doing significantly higher leverage, right? And the borrowers just don't need that much. So this isn't just for DSCR. This is for everybody. And Chris and I were circulating some of these TikToks that we saw and this article from the Baltimore Banner and then some videos. And we both kind of, ran into each other's offices independently. And we're like, listen, the whole industry is blaming this on appraisers. Like, this is an appraisal problem. Like, the appraisers aren't good enough. All of these issues have stuff going on with appraisals. And take fraud aside, because I get it. Like, fraud's fraud. But but let's pretend you're actually using real appraisals and real appraisers. This isn't an appraiser's problem. This is a valuation problem, because the lenders that are doing these loans don't fully know what they're lending against because they're not local. They don't know the areas. They might not even be experts in real estate valuations. And they believe that they can just hire an appraiser, quote unquote appraiser, and they're the expert in understanding the value of the property. So they should be able to tell me what that value is so I can lend based off that. And that's just not accurate. And this is not a stab at an appraiser whatsoever. This is a stab at the industry not knowing what they're lending against and what the values are, because it is hard. It is a localized business. It is very, very challenging. We do not lend in California because it is 3,000 miles away and I do not know California, and I cannot lend on an asset that I don't know. The asset of real estate is just like any other asset that you would invest in. And unless you truly know the value of that asset, that is changing, keep in mind, right? after repair values, as is values, properties that need construction, doing loans to borrowers that have very different backgrounds and experiences and qualifications. It is a moving freaking target. It's extremely challenging to know the value of the property, and there's no real way to add one blanket criteria on this, because these are investment transactions. These are not homeowner transactions. They're very, very, very different, and they're trying to use kind of banking requirements in order to operate this business. And I don't think it's possible, to be honest with you.
Yeah, let's make that comparison real quick, because I think that's an important place to start. So if you're talking about a homeowner loan, right? Fannie Mae's guidelines, Freddie Mac, FHA, for the longest time have been appraisal based, and it's just a different animal. Let's talk about it. So somebody is buying a house, they're making a 20% down payment in their personal name. It's going to be owner occupied, right? And the lender is depending on an appraisal to get their value, and then everything else is borrower based. So that type of underwriting, and mind you, we were in that business before HMB's days, with the exception of the subprime and craziness around 2006, 7. That business has been static and pretty reliable for a long time. You have this person or maybe a family that is buying a primary residence. They're going to put down X percent. Their income qualifies, their credit qualifies. Yeah, the value is important, and they can pretty much get that. They're as is values. That's an important distinction. You look at the properties in the subdivision. You say, okay, they're paying $1 million for it. That seems to be about right. We're financing 800. Everything checks out. Very low risk. Not a lot of moving parts. It's not like an investor deal. Let's talk about the other side of things. The business that we do is, okay, first of all, there's construction involved. In the majority of our lending, there's a construction component to it. You call it fix and flip or a rehab loan. The institutional guys call it RTL. It's all the same thing, where there's a construction component to this. There's an as-is value, an after-repair value, and a borrower who's in charge of creating this value. And how is an appraiser going to know what kind of product this particular borrower is going to create? They don't. They'll just take the top comps in the area and give you your value there. And hopefully even that's accurate, because that could be a little off, but hopefully that's not crazy off, right? And so it's just fundamentally a different type of lending, a different loan product. And so this institutional part of the industry took Fannie Mae's homeowner stuff and applied it to fix and flip investor deals, and it simply doesn't work. And that was echoed by the people who are on that stage. It's very publicly in social media and in this article. It was Eric Abramovich from Rock and also John Beecham from Torak, big names in the industry. Both said that the fact that we're relying on appraisers for valuations is a giant problem in the industry.
Yeah. And there's no real way to solve that when you're trying to deploy billions of dollars and thousands of units. For our size operation, or a lot of other folks that follow us in our Hard Money Mastermind group, they're trying to do a dozen deals a month, or a few dozen deals a month, or 5 deals a month. You can do that locally. You can do that with a small operation. You can understand the values. You can study the values. You can go to the properties. You can meet your borrowers. You can do all the offline boots on the ground stuff that is needed to do that. Now, obviously, on a larger level, you can't do that. And I also understand on a larger level that, if we have a few defaults, it really could hurt our business on their end. They could absorb a lot more defaults by doing so, right? Because it's a bigger operation. That being said, it's all kind of relative, and it's an issue. And before we finish this episode, not that I have a solution, but we talked earlier about potentially something that they could do. I'm not saying they would do this, but it's possible to create local presence. But let's talk about a few things kind of real quick. A banking philosophy or an institutional backed philosophy is typically like, okay, well, let's eliminate risk and, let's increase our interest rates, or let's lower our, LTV by 5%. I mean, I hate to say it, but that doesn't achieve anything. Like, it doesn't achieve anything, right? If a borrower really defaults badly on a deal and stuff falls apart, or construction was mismanaged, the valuation was way off. They overpay for the property. Like that's minuscule. Because if you're a hard money lender or private lender listening and you're like, okay, well, should I charge 14% instead of 13%? It's like, listen, that's not going to adjust your risk that much. That's $1,000 extra for every, $100,000 you borrow, you lend. Like that's not really achieving anything. Okay, can I lower my LTV from, 95% to 90%? It's like you're already way too high to begin with. Like if you're going to really do all these things, you need to lower your exposure extremely, like 10, 15, 40% lower. So instead of them bringing 20% to the table, have them bring 50% to the table. And for those listening, you might be like, well, that's extreme. I would never get loans. Maybe not. You're not going to get 1,000 loans a month. I promise you that. But if you build out a marketing machine, you will still do some. And this podcast is geared towards, local private and hard money lenders that are lending their own money and they want to be responsible, or they're raising private capital and they want to responsibly deploy it. It's not geared to someone who's deploying thousands and thousands of transactions. I do agree that it's appraisal issue. It's a valuation issue, and it's very, very hard to determine a solution to that. And on the banking model, like Chris talked about earlier, it is very credit driven, and they know, and the banks can correlate property types and credit scores and liquidity and and things like that to determine if it's a good credit risk, right? And the credit risk for a hard money lender is just one component of our underwriting, right? We got collateral, we got capacity, collateral, then character, then capacity, and then credit, right? Like that's the least most important for a hard money lender, right? We want to make sure this is a good physical asset that we can unload quickly. And then we want to make sure the borrower has good characteristics. Does the appraiser ask for the borrower's characteristics? No, they don't even know what the freaking borrower's name is or care. That's to us the second most important thing of the underwrite. Does the hard money lender, does the appraiser ask what the credit score is? There's a direct correlation of lower credit scores and higher construction projects typically default. That's not a question that an appraiser asks for. And this isn't a stab at an appraiser at all. My point is there's so many moving pieces in this particular transaction. There's so many moving things. And honestly, as much as I do like the DSCR product, there's a lot of risk in that as well. Because if you've ever been a lender on a property that's occupied and the tenant stops paying rent, the property needs deferred maintenance and the borrower can't come up with that, like there's a lot of risk. You got to do evictions before you do foreclosures, or you got to do a foreclosure, then you got to do the eviction. Like there's a lot of things. What's the difference in value between a fully maxed out renovated property to a nice livable property to a regular livable property, right? On day one, there's a big difference. On day 360, after a tenant's been living there, they took a fully nice renovated property that was maxed out, and now it's a nice livable property. Now it's a regular livable property. Now it's a property with wear and tear. Does that mean, and that value is decreasing in value? That property is decreasing in value as all of those things happen. And then you got to re-renovate it down the road. Are all those things getting taken into consideration? No, there's no way to take it into consideration. Let me say one more thing on my rant, and then Chris, you can jump right in, because I've been thinking about this is a valuation problem, not an appraisal problem, right? Because they're just using appraisals for evaluation, right? And that might not be the best source. So I'm like, okay, if we were to grow a company that was gigantic in multiple different markets, isn't something we're looking to do. Like, what would we do to potentially know that, we're doing good loans on good assets to the right borrower that meets all these requirements? And I think the play is potentially you have in-house employees that do valuations. Don't even call them appraisals. They're not appraisals. They're valuations. And you pay, depending on the size of your operation locally, let's say it was here and, we could do 100 loans a month in whatever, the Baltimore area, the DC area, pick a market, doesn't matter. In essence, and that was our job, was to do 100 deals a month because we were a huge lender. Like we'd have to hire 4 or 5 full-time valuation experts that knew the area, knew the markets, were always up to date, were literally living on MLS all day long and knew the area better than the best real estate agent, the best private lender, the best real estate investor, locally because they had boots on the ground every day. They're doing inspections. They're meeting borrowers. They're doing everything. And they're your eyes and ears in these individual areas. And you had 4 or 5 of them. This is a real job. This isn't like, hey, let's pay them a few $100s a pop. Like, you're paying them real money because they have a very high-end job of accomplishing this, because you're basing the entire business off the LTV of the price of the value of the asset, right? So they need to understand the value of the asset, and they're out on the streets all day long looking at properties, valuing properties, knocking on the next door neighbor's house. Does an appraiser ever tell you if the next door neighbor has a pit bull next to them, or if they have, a boarded up house next to them? Maybe not, depending on who they are, or if that the next door neighbor, has, an abandoned car or boat or something. Like, these are things that are taken into consideration when you're evaluating properties. But I do believe that if this was us and we were doing that much stuff, we could hire full-time people that really, really know the area and had high corporate training, right? And with these people, and train them of exactly what we wanted, not what an industry appraiser does, exactly what we're looking for, even down to like, hey, this is how we think the borrower is going to perform. Be like, hey, this is the last deal the borrower did. It was a $50,000 renovation budget. This was the last deal they did. Don't just ask the underwriter. Show that to the in-house valuator and say, hey, they did a job exactly like this. Go look at that property. And when you do your new valuation on the next property, compare it to that one. And this is heavy lifting. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this isn't. And that's why you need, half a dozen of these in order to master and have market share in an area. But I believe that could be the solution. So if any large institutional lenders are listening, that could be a solution for you. Instead of having third-party appraisals and doing, a second appraisal and then a drive-by appraisal and then a CMA and then this and this, like, maybe you want to hire in-house staff and do corporate recruiting to find, it could be an ex-appraiser, it could be a real estate agent or an investor, but someone who their full-time job is they're on the freaking streets for you. They have direct communication with you and the underwriting department, and they're out there and they know exactly what it is. And you tell them, hey, this is the qualifications of the borrower. They're a first-time real estate investor. They're not going to be, I don't care what their construction budget is, they are not going to have the best product in the neighborhood because they don't have the means to do it, and they will in the future, but they don't now because they're a first-time investor. Take that into consideration when you're valuing the property.
Yeah, I mean, the only person in that institutional side of things that we've seen do something even close to what you described there, and it's not the full scope of that, but Jack Bevere, who was on our podcast recently from Dominion Financial, he and his team, and he ultimately signs off on any valuation they do for a DSCR loan or for a rehab loan, actually underwrite on top of whatever appraisal they get. First of all, they get appraisals because they have to, because they sell all these loans, right? So it has to be part of the file. But they will kill a deal or adjust a valuation based on their own internal metrics, which he's the only person I've heard mention any of this. The rest of them, it's just, here's the guidelines, get an appraisal, close the deal. Like, when I see on social media, and this makes me cringe for a couple reasons, somebody talking about, I'm based in Texas and here's a loan that we just closed in Chicago. It's a fix and flip loan. The loan amount was $1,014,736. And first of all, why don't you just make the loan amount fucking $1 million? Like, it just looks like a stupid loan amount, but that's not the point. That's not the risk conversation we're talking about. That's just a pet peeve of mine when they have these dumb, random off loan amounts. But they're selling this immediately to institutional, or maybe it's even being table funded. They're underwriting to their guidelines, and they're doing a 90 loan to cost, and it's within 70 loan to value. And like, according to the institutional guidelines, it all matches up. It'll get sold, right? And that lender from Texas perceives that they don't have any risk. This is not my money. I'm doing exactly the guidelines they say, and blah, blah, blah. Here's the problem. You do have risk. You have buyback risk. And that stuff can happen not only from fraud, just from a default. Remember that you signed their agreement. If they pull the file and want to make you buy that back, you have to buy that back. And it could be, where are you going to get $1 million for a bad loan? Something that was underwritten incorrectly, or, possibly even fraudulent. Hopefully not. But just a bad loan where somebody went a default earlier, they missed the first payment. Like, you get a missed first payment, you are buying that loan back. And there is real risk there. That's why I get nervous for some of these lenders when I see them talking on social media about it. Granted, like if they're just, a commission-based loan originator, they don't have risk in this, right? But some people, that you see out there, they're the owner of that company. They have risk. Their company has real liability on these things. And it just makes me cringe. And that's, one of the main reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we started the Mastermind group so many years ago, 6 or so years ago now, is that we wanted to be a group of lenders doing this business responsibly. It's a great business model when done right. You make good profit margins, a good return on capital. It's both a business, a profit machine, and also an investment vehicle. And that's really hard to find when you do it right. And when we see people out there doing this wild stuff, like, we get a little worried about it. But either way, everyone inside the Mastermind group, they're lending in a solid and responsible way. When we meet twice a year, 3 times a year now, that's what we're talking about. In addition to systems and marketing and everything else, it's default management, proper underwriting, valuations, inspections. Let's be responsible about this whole thing.
Yeah. And this episode isn't intended to be confrontational and like, hey, you're doing this wrong, we're doing this right. It's the industry as a whole, should be doing things properly, because listen, a lot of, we don't have a lot of market exposure because we don't do a lot of stuff in Baltimore, even though our office is 10 minutes from there. But there's a lot of lenders in Baltimore that got smoked through this appraisal issue. These fraudulent appraisals and these fraudsters on these DSCR loans. And, it's in essence going to ruin a lot of things in the industry because that happened. And I understand that there was fraud involved, and whenever there's fraud involved, it's like, hey, how could we have protected ourselves in the future? Take that aside. The point is the most important component of this business is understanding how to value properties and understanding how to value the property, not necessarily just on the back end when the property is completely fully renovated and ready to get sold or ready to refinance a new DSCR loan, but also day one of what is the property today. And too many lenders have way too much exposure on the property up front. And the excuse that everybody has is, well, if I make the borrower bring more money to the table, or there's this or there's that, I'm not going to be able to do loans. And that's the risk that you take in order to do this. You need to wear your underwriting hat, and you need to wear your sales, operational, and, loan officer hat to try to get deals. But that's a fine line, and that's a risk that you are going to take. And it's stuff that we work on every day internally to make sure. And believe me, there's a lot of deals that we have conversations with our partners in our other markets, and we're like, hey, listen, we're good on a valuation side. We don't have a collateral problem, but we have a borrower problem. And you know what? I don't want to go down this road at a 20 LTV with a borrower that is not going to perform, because that's going to be a headache, and it's something we don't want to get involved in. So the majority, of the purpose is start with the valuation and figure out what you have to do to make sure you are fully comfortable on a valuation side of the collateral on every single loan that you do.
All right, everyone, that is the pod for today. If you haven't done so already, go check out hardmoneymastermind.com, click on live events, talk to our team about everything we have coming up in 2026, and we hope to see you there.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.